No regrets.
No regret.
To those who thought they could destroy you, Nadia Murad's spirit is not broken.
Who do we turn to for our people's right to survive?
My voice is kaput.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this session on media freedom. My name's David Campbell. I'm with the World Press Photo Foundation, which is based here in Amsterdam, and it's my privilege to have been asked to moderate this session and pose some questions to four very interesting individuals from different countries to discuss questions of press freedom. When I was going through my news feed thinking about this issue, just in the last month, it's amazing the stories that have cropped up, and some of them are familiar and some of them offer some slightly different angles on press freedom. I saw accounts of the way that in the Philippines, the organization Rappler, which is a very progressive media organization, the head of that, Maria Rasla, is facing persecution through the use of tax law and libel law, trying to constrain her media organization. We've seen a US judge recently rule that Marie Colvin, the war correspondent for the Times, was actually specifically targeted and murdered by the Syrian state in 2012. In the last month, there was an account of a Ghanaian investigative journalist, Ahmed Hussein Swali, who was shot dead near his family home in Accra, in Ghana, killed by people, gunmen working on behalf of people that he'd been investigating. And at World Press Photo, we also confront this issue with various photographers and visual journalists we work with. Last year, we saw Shahid al-Alam, a very well-known Bangladeshi photographer and activist, imprisoned for 100 days. And of course, the most famous, most infamous case is that of Mahmoud Abu Zaid, or known as Shorkan, who's now been in jail in Egypt for more than 5 years, simply for photographing protests in 2013. All these things are an indication of what Article 19 described as one of the most dangerous years in journalism the last year. Their report said that journalism is more dangerous and more under threat than at any point in the last decade, and 78 journalists were killed in 2018 while doing their job. So tonight we're going to talk with journalists from Iraq, Turkey and the Netherlands to see what issues they're dealing with, differences between those places, but also some similarities between different places. Let's begin with Nabil Khoury. And Nabil, if you'd like to come up. Nabil is the Iraq Program Director at the Institute of War and Peace Reporting. And Nabil was telling me earlier that you are in effect in exile at the moment. You were deported from Iraq, is that correct?
Yeah, but I said that let's keep this internal.
I forgot that part.
Okay. See, we journalists, we can't keep anything.
He didn't say off the record.
Okay.
But you, even when you're working there normally, you face personally quite some difficulties in the work that you do?
Yeah, I mean, difficulties everywhere.
Yeah.
The job what we do, especially when we work in conflict, in countries at conflict, you know, you face multiple level of danger and risk and you know, threat and intimidation. It's because simply at these countries, people there are not embracing change very happily. So they're prone to, you know, reject change because, you know, it's their comfort zone when you come with the new approaches and so on. the first thing that we face is like really rejection. And this is one of the lessons learned that we've learned, that, you know, change must come incremental, little by little and through different means in order to really achieve change. If you're, you know, thinking about implementing programming or doing responsible journalism for 1 year and 2 and expect that to have really a change, that's not going to be a good thinking, good planning. So it's really incremental. We as the Institute for War and Peace Reporting, we've been, I mean, we came very early to Iraq in 2003. We were one of the first international organizations to jump in after the toppling of Saddam Hussein and support the media there at both institutional and individual level. We have trained thousands of, you know, Iraqi journalists and civil activists and media institutions. But we still need to be there. No, we were not alone. We've got a lot of partners also doing the same thing. Unfortunately, I have to say that we failed internationally to really build sustainability in Iraq at the media level that forced all potential individuals, journalists and activists to migrate and work from abroad. And those who were left, who stayed in the country, unfortunately, they face multiple of, you know, problems, starting from being professional at work, and also from, you know, finding good source of income. Because we as journalists, we don't just like, you know, write articles and do things just for, you know, the betterment of the people. We need to live as well. Yeah. Absolutely. And if I don't have that sort of income, that, you know, forces me to really work with media institutions owned by political money or partisan money or wherever, and then at the end I'm biased, I'm accused, I don't know, you know, I'm dictated to do what I do, and that questions my credibility.
When you, I mean, how do you think about press freedom? What do you think is the most important dimension or factor in it? Because when we commonly think about it, and in those cases I cited, it's very often governments imprisoning journalists, governments killing journalists, obviously extremely serious. But are there other dimensions that you think are significant? Is it more complex than just government oppression?
Yeah, from my experience, and I don't know, maybe what I'm going to say now might be pleasant for many, but when we speak about freedom, we have also associated that with responsibility. So press freedom, yes, but also we want press responsibility. We want responsible journalism. There are many now, like let's say Iraq specific, many who pretend to be journalists and act as journalists. They don't respect ethical standards and they endanger the whole mission. So then we are all seen as those. And that, you know, that encouraged the government to crack down on freedoms and you know, censor rights and freedom of speech and so on because of many individuals. Furthermore, there are also many individuals who are within the journalistic body, they are at conflict. How can we really demand press freedom, journalistic freedoms when we are really at war and we as journalists undermine each other? I mean, the government is an enemy of press, yes, this is known, it's nothing new. But why are we enemies of ourselves?
When you say journalists are undermining each other, give us an example. What sort of things are they doing that are limiting the freedom of the journalists they're targeting?
Governments and politicians are really smart. We can't just, consider that they are not smart. They know very well what to do, and they know media is a very powerful tool. So first thing they do in order to, foster their position is they go and, start leveraging media resources that they have to undermine others. And first thing they do, they start with, media institutions and bright journalists, like smart journalists, and they try to convert them, and then these journalists, they start to, work against the others. Few journalists came into positions, like in Iraq, they were journalists, so-called independent, and in few cabinets, they were asked to take sovereign positions, such as like military or security positions. And instead of facilitating the media role and the job and giving permissions, they were harsh on media more than those who were not involved in media. So what does it mean?
Overall, how would you characterize the situation in Iraq today in terms of how the media can operate? How would you think about the level of press freedom in Iraq?
I think there is really a very bright light at the end of the tunnel. It's not, we cannot say that there is only media now. There is also an activism, and there's a confusion between both. With the emergence of the social media, the traditional media has retreated. And now everybody is a citizen journalist. I see that there is a very positive youth trend uprising in Iraq, and it's really pushing toward change. However, there is no political or economical support for that change to really continue and maintain positive. And I'm afraid if this is gonna be let go like this for a certain period of time, then this trend, instead of being positive, might really deviate into something negative that we don't wish. In general, after 5 years of decade, and this is applicable on Iraq and in many other Arabic countries who live totalitarian regimes and so on, people and media and activists there, they don't know how to report life. They don't know how to report normal living. They are stuck in the conflict and war because this is what the media was feeding them, and this is what the regimes were planting in their head, that there is an enemy all the time. So they are stuck in this idea that they cannot really report peace and normal life. They just need conflict. And this is our struggle. We struggle every day really to mentor them that, you know, struggle and war is just a phase and things which should return to normal. And what will you do then? You don't know what to tell? There are plenty of stories from, you know, normal life.
So would you say having a wider range of stories and a more diverse range of stories is also
more positivity,
part of freedom itself?
More positivity. Because when we speak, you know, because what creates resilience in people? Now people in, you know, living in dire situation at conflict, you know, if you feed them with a lot of negativity, then you are pushing them to surrender. Whether activists or journalists, you're pushing them to surrender to negativity, but we really need to start to introduce some positivity in what we do so we can encourage positive trends. And otherwise, everybody will be just reporting on negative. They want to see a scandal here, a conflict there, and, you know, killing there, a bomb here, but nobody wants to really report on a young man or woman who succeeded in their lives despite that, you know, without any support from their family or from the state, from scratches they built something, you know, that contributed to the betterment of themselves and their community as well. Right. So these stories, unfortunately, they are not so attractive in the region where I come from. Right. What's attractive is scandal and political deals and so on. So how can we really change this?
Mm-hmm. Speaking of young men and women, nearly half of Iraq's population is under 19. And a huge number, 70% you told me, are unemployed.
Many people, many adults were killed. They were fuel of war, wars actually. And this is the new generation. And here is the hope. And this hope is very nascent. I mean, of course, we sense in them that they're really prone to live and enjoy life. But with unemployment, with no attention and no care from the state, what do we expect from this generation to be later on? You know, how resilient can be? How long their stamina can last?
Do you see media in Iraq addressing the concerns of that younger generation that makes up that nearly half the population? Is it a particular challenge to do that?
we have started to plant this seed through our programming. We work mostly on strategic messaging to really address this and to support young voices. It's becoming a trend, but yet it needs further support in order really to foster it and preserve it and from any manipulation. The youth movements could be, positive and negative as well, because this is very nascent, this is vulnerable, it's subject to anything, and it requires more attention and more support. But I see some hope there.
Yeah. So to conclude for the moment, what do you think is the best thing that you can see in the future that's going to happen in terms of media freedom in Iraq? What do you think is the most positive thing that's most likely?
And we need to work more on foster also responsible journalism. We can't just monitor and record violations against freedoms of press and other. We need to really also work on creating sustainable institutions. Otherwise, we'll be just like, working from abroad and monitoring this country and that country and saying, oh, the indicator of freedoms is going down. We have to speak more. No, speaking doesn't make a lot of things.
You need institutions, not just
yes.
talk. Okay. Well, Nabil, thank you very much for the moment. We will be having a roundtable discussion with everyone after we've had individual contributions. So we'll be hearing more from Nabil a little bit later on. But now I would very much like to welcome to the stage Füsün Erdoğan. Füsün is a Dutch-Turkish journalist. She has been in prison in Turkey, was imprisoned in Turkey for 8 years because of her work, imprisoned on charges of leading a, quote, terrorist movement because she was the leader of a left opposition party and because of her writings on the rights of minorities, such as the Kurds. She's going to give us her story as a way of thinking about press freedom in Turkey, and she's going to be assisted by Aktaş to do a translation.
2006 yılında 8 Eylül tarihinde sokaktan gözaltına alındım.
In 2006, in September, I had been kidnapped from the street.
İzmir'den alındım ve İstanbul'a getirildim.
I have been taken by Izmir and brought into Istanbul.
2 yıla yakın herhangi bir duruşmaya çıkmadan tutsak kaldım.
For 2 years, I didn't know why I was in prison, so there was no any trial.
Daha sonra 7 yıl 2 ay süren bir uzun yargılama süreci yaşandı. 7 yıl 2 ay.
For 7 years and 2 months afterwards, it was the whole trial went on.
Duruşmanın sonunda, yargılama sürecinin sonunda iyi hal uygulanarak müebbet hapis cezası artı 789 yıl 7 ay hapis cezasına çarptırıldım. Müebbet hapis.
I got life sentenced and
789 yıl 7 ay.
789 years.
8 months.
Yeah, and 7 months I got punishment sentenced. Yeah, so.
Bu rakamı duyunca mutlaka insanlar şöyle düşünecektir.
When people hears about these numbers,
ne yaptı acaba bu kadar hapis cezasını almak için diye.
How did she achieve to get such a big number?
Hiçbir şey yapmadım.
I haven't done anything.
Bir radyom vardı.
I was a founder of a radio station.
Haftanın 7 günü orada çalışıyordum.
I have been working there 7 days in a week.
Radyonun hem kurucusu hem yöneticisiydim.
I was the director and the founder of the radio station.
Bunun dışında zaten yargılama süreci boyunca da ne polisin, ne de savcının, ne de mahkemenin elinde başka bir şey yoktu.
And also during the trials, at the prosecutors, they didn't had any evidence about that I did something different than that.
Yargılama sürecinin sonucunda ortaya çıkan bu tablo esasında benim şahsımda Türkiye'deki basın özgürlüğü ve gazetecilerin, muhalif gazetecilerin yaşamına dair bir veri.
This story is already by itself telling how the press freedom is, how the situation is.
Çünkü bir ülkede eğer basın özgürlüğünün, yaşama hakkının, insan haklarının, demokrasinin ve özgürlüklerin nasıl olduğuna bakmak istiyorsanız basına ve hapishanelerine bakmak lazım.
If you want to know about any country, how is the human rights, the situation of human rights and press freedom, you just need to look at the media and the prisons.
Ben bir örnektim ama benim gibi onlarca gazeteci hapishanedeydi.
I wasn't just one example, but there were many of journalists in
2016 15 Temmuz tarihindeki darbe girişiminden sonra bu durum çok daha vahim hale geldi, çok daha kötüleşti.
After the coup, it even went worse.
Oraya gelmeden önce kendi durumumdan devam etmek istiyorum.
If I continue with my own story.
Kasım 2013 yılında bu cezayı aldım. Yargılama süreci tamamlandı yerel mahkemede.
I got punished in November 2013.
2013 Aralık ayında Türkiye'de siyasal iktidar içerisinde bir çatışma yaşandı. 2013 Aralık.
2013 December, there was a conflict in the country between the two big power.
Fethullah Gülen ve Erdoğan arasında yaşanan bu çatışma
Between Fethullah Gülen and Erdoğan.
uzun tutukluluk süresinde bir değişiklik yapmalarına yol açtı.
The situation the conflict forced them to change the long imprisonment time without any results.
Yasal olarak bir kişinin 5 yıl içerisinde yargılama sürecinin bitirilmesi gerekiyor.
So the any trial has to finish. The case should finish in 5 years in the law. That's what they changed.
Ama ben 7 yıl 2 ay sonra cezaya çarptırılmıştım.
But her case ended more than 7 years later.
Dolayısıyla hem ailemin yürüttüğü bir kampanya ve dayanışma hem gazeteci örgütlerinin kampanyası etkili oldu serbest bırakılmamda.
So the journalists who fought for the situation, against the situation, and my own family who made a campaign about this helped the situation actually. So law change was not enough.
8 Mayıs 2014 yılında tahliye edildim. 8 Mayıs 2014 yılında
8 of May
serbest bırakıldım.
2014. 2014 she got free.
Dosyam yüksek mahkemeye gönderildi tahliyeden sonra.
After the freedom, the case sent it to a higher court.
Ben de Hollanda vatandaşıydım. ID kartımı aldım ve kaçtım.
She had a Dutch citizenship, so she didn't wait. She couldn't trust, and just left the country.
Yurt dışına çıkma yasağım vardı.
She had actually conditionally released that she cannot leave the country.
Bu nedenle Türkiye'yi kaçak geçmek zorunda kaldım.
She had to go illegal ways out of the country.
Sonrası zaten sorunsuzdu.
The rest was just easy after coming to.
Şimdi ben kısacık Türkiye'de aslında basın özgürlüğüne ilişkin bazı küçük bilgiler vermek istiyorum.
I would like to give some information about the press freedom in Turkey, short information.
Türkiye Gazeteciler Sendikası'nın verilerine göre 3 Ocak 2019 itibariyle
The Turkish Journalist Association. Sen söyler misin?
Türkiye Gazeteciler Sendikası.
Yeah.
Fakbund.
Yeah.
139 gazeteci ve medya çalışanı hapishanede şu anda.
139 journalists is in prison now.
Hapishanelerde ise 264.031 insan, 150.000 kişilik, 200.000 kişilik kapasiteli hapishanelerde.
160.
Hayır. 264.031 toplam tutuklu sayısı.
264,000 people in prison, but the capacity of the prisons
200.000 civarında.
about 200,000 of the prisons.
Ve Türkiye'de en çok yapılan şeylerden bir tanesi cezaevi inşa etmek.
And that's the most common thing to do in Turkey, to build a prison, new prisons all the time.
Şu anda 31.442 kişi
Now 31,000
Fethullah Gülen davasından yargılanıyor.
charged because of the case of Fethullah Gülen.
9.731 10.000 civarında
9,731 people.
HDP'li tutuklu.
HDP, the party,
Legal
Turkish party,
party.
legal party, people
Tutuklu.
in prison.
Ve şu ana kadar 700 civarında da küçük çocuk annesiyle birlikte hapishanede.
And 700 children are inside the prison with their mothers.
Hala hapishane yapmaya devam ediyorlar.
They still build prisons.
Ekonomik kriz ve yaşam koşulları giderek ağırlaşmasına rağmen
The economy, the conditions on economy is even going low.
bütün gazetelerin ve televizyonların, radyoların muhalif olanlarını, AKP'den olmayanların kapısına kilit vurdular.
All the media is actually locked by the government if they are not supporting the government.
Mallarına el koydular.
They lost all their valuables.
Dolayısıyla şu anda gazetelerin manşetleri tek bir yerden atılıyor.
So all the mainstream media is actually making the same news as each other.
Televizyonda program yapan gazeteciler Tayyip Erdoğan'ın telefonuyla işten atılıyor.
TV programmers are being kicked out by their jobs with the phone of Erdogan.
Sadece politik olması gerekmiyor.
And it doesn't has to be political.
Örneğin bir kadın dekolte giymiş program yapıyorsa,
If the woman is not wearing something proper,
bir telefonla işten atılabiliyor.
in one call she can just lose her job.
Son olarak şu anda Türkiye'de hapishanede başladı açlık grevine. Bir tane 24 Haziran'da seçilmiş milletvekili 93 gündür açlık grevinde.
For 93 days,
93 gün.
doing hunger strike, who was actually chosen by elections, and he's in prison. She's in prison.
75. gününde onu tahliye ettiler.
She got
75 gün.
free in the 75th day.
300 civarında tutsak 55 gündür açlık grevinde.
For 300 prisoners are in hunger strike for 55 days.
Türkiye'deki televizyonları, gazetelerin hepsini tarayabilirsiniz.
You may check all the TVs and radios.
Bir tane haber göremezsiniz bunlarla ilgili.
You may not see any news about these facts.
basın özgürlüğü, Türkiye'de basın özgürlüğü ne durumda dediğiniz zaman bu çok küçücük bir örnek.
This is just a small example if you ask a question of how is the press freedom in Turkey.
Teşekkür.
Thank you for that story. Sure.
You were charged because for your radio station?
Radyo istasyonunuz olduğu için mi?
Ya.
Ceza çarptınız?
Evet.
Without a license or with a license?
Lisansınız olup olmadığı için mi?
Her şey vardı.
That was everything.
She was sentenced for advocating for minority rights, such as Kurds.
Sadece bir şey söyleyeceğim. Türkiye'de gazetecileri ya da siyasetçileri gözaltına alınıp tutuklarken, ceza verirken
When they sentenced or arrested the journalists in Turkey,
rejim aynen şu yöntemi uyguluyor.
the regime applies this.
Diyor ki sen yasa dışı şu örgütün yöneticisisin, elemanısın diyor.
You are a member of a illegal terror organization.
Elinde herhangi bir yazılı belge, kanıt olması gerekmiyor.
They don't need any evidence to be able to do that.
Terörle mücadele yasası var Türkiye'de.
There is a law about this in the terror laws.
Size bunu polis ya da savcı ya da mahkeme sizi terörist ilan ettiği zaman
When you are charged or sentenced as a terrorist,
siz uğraşacaksınız ki ben terörist değilim diyeceksiniz. Yani ispatlamak zorundasınız.
you need to prove
Ama
that
nasıl?
you're a journalist, not them.
Thank you. Can we welcome two other people to the stage? Clarice Gargard, who's a freelance journalist in the Netherlands, and Jan Kooy, who is the Deputy European Media Director at Human Rights Watch. Just come and join us. But first, just one question to Füsün. You now live in the Netherlands. Do you feel that you are free from the situation that you faced in Turkey, or do you still feel that there are constraints on you from the Turkish government, even though you live here?
Burada yaşamana rağmen Türkiye'den hala bir sıkıntı yaşıyor musun ya da? Evet.
Yaşıyorum. Çünkü Türkiye'ye gidemiyorum.
I can't go back to my country anymore.
2 abimi kaybettim, annemi kaybettim ama onların son yolculuğunda yanlarında olamadım.
I lost my brother passed away, my mother passed away, and I couldn't be there for their funeral.
Ayrıca sosyal medya üzerinden sık sık tehditler alıyorum.
And from the social media, I get threatened.
Jan, just a question to you. You've heard these two stories. Would you say that these have common threads that you see in your work, your analysis, in a whole range of other countries?
Well, short answer is yes. We see this in more countries. And Iraq and Turkey have bad records, of course, on press freedom. Iraq very low, and Turkey also very low. The biggest jailer of reporters in the world right now. And yeah, if you look at Reporters Without Borders, for instance, their reports, CPJ, their weekly reports, paint a very dire picture. And we also, see press freedom as a very important thing to investigate, document on. In countries such as Turkey, like I just brought this from the desk. It's called Silencing Turkish Media. A report we put out in 2016 that describes a very bad situation after the failed coup in Turkey. What Füsün basically gave from our own personal experience. We saw that the structural problem in Turkey, far too many reporters are locked up. Freedom of speech under threat, a massive problem in Turkey. And as always, what we see in countries like Turkey, but also Iraq, and to a certain extent also in Europe, like Hungary, for instance, right now, where independent voices are being silenced and taken over by the state. Hungary, for instance. It's a canary in a coal mine, is what a colleague told me earlier today when we had a conversation about this upcoming panel. When press freedom is threatened, a country can quickly go down on press freedom, but also on other things that are vital for democracy. So that's in a nutshell what we see as trends.
Clarice,
Yes.
your experience working in the Netherlands. For people coming from outside the Netherlands, it ranks number 4 on the Press Freedom Index. It's almost at the top. It seems excellent. How would you characterize it as a working freelance journalist here?
Well, I would say it is pretty excellent, relatively. If you hear these stories, of course, we don't have to deal with the imminent threats and direct physical violence or from the oppression from the government. Well, I would say that there are some journalists who do have really imminent death threats, like crime journalists like John van der Heuvel or Paul Vught. You know, they should also be here, actually, I hope. But generally, we don't have to fear from the government. So, no, there's not. That's why we're probably ranked as number 4. But I think the stifling of the press, of the freedom of speech of the press, or the movement of the press can manifest itself in different ways. It isn't always in a physical way. It can also be digitally, for example, which happens a lot. And you just mentioned yourself that you receive a lot of threats online. I mean, I feel like that's been sort of the culture for the past, maybe decade now, and it's been increasing, that there's a lot of online violence and harassment, and that is a different form of stifling of the press and the freedom of speech. And one that I think is more present in countries where the press freedom generally is pretty okay. Yeah.
One of the things that we were talking about briefly earlier was the question of economic inequality and how that plays into questions of press freedom. And Nabil also mentioned it in terms of, is it possible to have a sustainable working life as a journalist in Iraq and so on. How would you characterize the situation in the Netherlands, your experience on that?
Well, even here again, even if it's relatively better, I mean, my parents are from Liberia, so I've seen and I've talked to, and I have friends, journalists who work there, who are in similar dire situations, or have been during the war, and even post-war. There's a little to no press freedom in Liberia. I think you would obviously know that as well. That it's difficult. So I know these situations, but I think. Even though our situation in Europe or in the Netherlands is different, they all have the same root cause, I think, several, which is journalists don't get paid enough, first of all, for the work that they do, be it in a post-war country or a dictatorship, or in a democracy. So the work isn't valued. So and then also next to that, the work isn't valued. I feel like there's a little or not a lot of solidarity amongst colleagues. So I think, Nabil, you just said that yourself, that within the field, journalists themselves are, not attacking each other or competing with each other, because it is the system is set in such a way, because it's a capitalist system. We have to earn money. We don't earn a lot of money, so instead of helping each other with the harassment, with the violence, we are competing with each other instead of making a fist against whatever it is that causes this economic inequity or this stifling of our speech. We're more focused on surviving. And I also think another thing that sort of happens then is that you also can't do your work properly when you're constantly just living from check to check, insecure about your daily or monthly income, and then next to that you have to deal with violence, oppression, or harassment. So that also makes it impossible to sort of improve the infrastructure.
So constraints come from many different directions, many different dimensions.
Yes, and I think we need to focus on, okay, so what can we do to, because these problems aren't new, they just get new faces, like the online harassment that I have to deal with a lot. It's just a new face of the the same problem. So, but what we've been dealing with, it's been happening for decades. So we need to think about how can we create structural impact and a different infrastructure and safety. Also, like not only physical safety, but also a sort of a safe environment for journalists to do their jobs. And so I think if we would focus on that, it would be a better solution than just these sort of symptoms that we're just putting how do you say that, band-aids on open wounds. You know, it's not helping.
Nabil, thinking back to what you were saying in terms of Iraq and capacity and sort of the economic status of journalists. I mean, how is journalism valued in Iraq? Is it valued?
It is valued. It is perceived as a really powerful tool, definitely, and that's encouraging. And it's encouraging many youth to come and join the sector, looking for fame, rapid gains, and so on. Also, if you look at international media institutions, whenever there is war, they send crews and they start to recruit big payments, and then when the war is over, when the conflict is over, everybody's jobless. It's again, you know, they are searching for wars and conflict to cover, and when there is peace and stability in the country, it's not attractive for even international media. CNN doesn't send crew if there is no war or conflict. I wish they send crews when there is stability. Again, when you send a crew and then you need locals, you need stringers and cameramen and fixers and so on. So that's give the locals some prosperity, but then it's gone. And then what do? And they start to really, search for jobs at local market, and local market, as I explained to you, it's not even a market.
Jan, taking kind of a global view, where are the bright spots? Where are things going well? We know and the stories about where things are going badly are obvious and serious, but can you identify places where things are going well and how they got to go better in those places?
Yeah, there are quite a few places where it goes very well. I mean, the Netherlands indeed is doing very good. The Scandinavian countries that I actually cover for Human Rights Watch, the media relations there, they're very good. The US used to be very good. People are laughing for a reason. The president is attacking the press and has been doing that already in his election campaign and has been consistently keeping that up in the past years. And that's awful. I mean, it's a threat to democracy in the US. But that can change again. We also look at it from the bright side. He lost the midterm elections in a massive way, and a next president could really also repair the situation. That's the US. Maybe I should also then still mention, we talked about Turkey and Iraq. Turkey, the US government right now, Trump is also backing Saudi Arabia, still on the Khashoggi murder. But again, there's also a positive thing there. I mean, we, Human Rights Watch and other organizations, are pushing for a full independent UN investigation into that murder. There's already been an investigation now recently, as you may know. But that should be a start. It's good, but there should be more. There should be full transparency on what happened, and the persons that are responsible for that murder, all the way to the top, should suffer consequences for what happened in Istanbul to Khashoggi.
Can I also respond to
sure, please.
What you said? Because you said that in the Netherlands and Scandinavian countries, but like I said, I feel like there are new threats, like a lot of online harassment, and research has shown that online harassment has the same effects as offline harassment abuse. So if you're getting harassed at work, physically, it sort of restricts you from functioning, and also has like a physical and mental impacts on you. So the same happens online. I think those things are, it's epidemic, but because we're living this sort of new digital age, we don't have the necessary tools to deal with that. And I think it was maybe a month ago that they did this research on female journalists and politicians, and that they receive abuse every 30 seconds in 2017. Every 30 seconds, a female journalist or politician is harassed, twice as much if you're a black woman journalist or a black woman politician. And these are things that cause restriction, So I think it's also, even though things are good, there are new threats coming up, and that if we can't even deal with the old threats, how are we going to deal with these new things? You know, so that's also something to focus on.
Can I comment on that? Because that's very valid information what you're giving, and the Dutch authorities need to really take this very seriously. I mean, we're doing good over the whole range of press freedom topics, but this should be dealt with. What you experienced is unacceptable. Also, a reason why we invited you to tell your story. I mean, people have to suffer consequences if they threaten to rape people or murder people online, on Twitter or on Facebook. Authorities need to do something, but also these social media companies have a responsibility to act and to do something, and not just sit and say, okay, we just have a platform and people can do whatever they want on it.
And journalists themselves, I think typically we like to be middle of the road. I'm not middle of the road. I think I think when there's inequality or inequity, you have to speak up. You can always be like you said. You know, we're not copy machines. We're not living outside of the world. We're living in it. So you have a responsibility. And I feel like too much we like to be middle in the road. And I think we should meddle more. So also when it comes to our own safety, we're the ones creating the news. I mean, how is this not something that we're addressing more? So.
People in the middle of the road get run over.
Get run over.
It's not a good place
exactly.
to be. You want to take a position on that. But that brings us close. You have another role too, in addition to being freelance journalist. You are also a UN Women's representative.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about that, and tell us about how you think those questions of gender inequality and diversity play into the question of press freedom.
We live in a diverse society, right? And I mean, half of the world's population is female, it's feminine. So if we live in this world and we only see the world from one perspective, then you're not serving your public, right? So that's part of it, that we're not completely portraying the world in all its diversity and all its layers, and that's a disservice to your public and also disservice to yourself as a maker, because then you're not challenging yourself to do better or be better or tell different stories, but just kind of reproducing the same things over and over while the world and society is progressing and you're staying behind. So we need to or others. I feel like I try to do that constantly to keep up with society. And so I'm UN Women's representative, and because I study journalism, I've always worked as a journalist or a columnist or program maker just in media, and I see that there's a lack of representation of women and different types of women also in media, in front of the camera as well as behind the scenes in positions where they have power, influence. And like I said, it causes a disbalance. And if we're talking about being balanced and fair and showing the world in all its layers and representing, then we're not doing that. So that's something that needs to change. Yeah.
Soon, I wonder if I can ask you a question. You're still working as a journalist and working here in the Netherlands as a journalist?
Hollanda'da gazeteci olarak çalışmıyorum, ancak gazetecilik mesleğini sürdürüyorum.
I'm not working as a journalist in Netherlands, but I still go on as a journalist.
Türkçe gazetelere ve internet sitelerine yazıyorum.
I write on the Turkish websites, online newspapers.
And are you working on particular stories, particular topics that you're investigating?
Bir tanesi kadınlarla ilgili daha çok yazıyorum.
Mostly I'm writing about women.
Bir de Türkiye'deki siyasal durumlarla ilgili.
And also the political situation in Turkey.
And in the current work that you're doing, do you face these questions of online abuse that Clarice was talking about, that women journalists often face?
Kadın gazeteciler aslında tıpkı diğer mesleklerdeki gibi hep ikinci planda.
The women journalists are always in the behind compared to
Örneğin Türkiye'de genel yayın yönetmeni, haber müdürü kadın bulamazsınız.
you may not find a director, women director in any journalist.
Daha çok muhabirlik yaparlar kadınlar.
They're mostly doing reporters.
Bu durumun nedeni kadınların başarısız olması değil.
It's not because the women are unsuccessful.
İkinci planda tutulmaları ve emeklerinin sömürülmesi.
It's because that it's the general problem in the society with women.
That sounds familiar. We're going to open up for questions in 1 second, but I'm now going to put everyone on the spot with one question. If you had the ultimate power in the world and you could do one thing to improve, one specific thing to improve press freedom in your particular country or your particular domain, what would you do? Jan, you get to go first.
Yeah, make sure that Human Rights Watch gets a lot of money. So we can do much more than we do right now already. So to do our research, but also on press freedom. Yeah.
More activism.
Yeah.
I think human rights should be taught at schools and in schools and should be also a natural element in the media coverage. Unfortunately, in our side of the world, whenever you see a piece or a spot of human rights, it's always paid. It's always a PSA. It's produced externally and being brought to that institution to be broadcasted. It's never an initiative, internal initiative of the journalist or the desk news desk to really go and make story about human rights. And if they do sometimes story about human rights, sometimes the intentions are good, but the end up results are disastrous. I think this is because of the lack of the culture. It's not really enough to just monitor and report on violations. It's important to create the culture because that's provide the ground for this to live and go and be sustainable and continue to exist. We can't just monitor and report on things that do not exist basically. This is what I would really do. I don't work
Create
with that.
the human rights culture.
I would create a culture of human rights that it's very natural. We should really increase awareness amongst people. Sometimes they have their rights abused, but they don't know this is abuse of their rights. They don't know it because they've been living and they consider it's normal. This is how the regimes normalized abuse. So the abuse become normal thing. And people feel, oh, but it's fine. We are okay. But they don't think that their rights were abused and continue to be abused. This is the problem.
Clarice.
I would say create new infrastructure. So that can mean create new infrastructure in a sense that there's a place for journalists to go to make reports. It's being archived, but there are also consequences to whatever threats or violence they receive. But also creating new infrastructure in a sense that a new way of reporting, new way of media making, new way of news making. Instead of, and why I say infrastructure is because we've been talking about these things for, like I said before, for decades. And then you have a commission there, and you have a panel talk here, and there's it's good, but it doesn't create structural change. And then it's just like, how do you say it in Dutch? You say vechten tegen de bierkaai. There's no English translation for that, I think. But it's like it's not sustainable. Yeah. So creating new sustainable infrastructure.
Cool. And Füsün?
Basın özgürlüğünün herkes için olduğunu düşünüyorum.
I think that the press freedom is for everyone.
Dolayısıyla adalet ve özgürlük ve basın özgürlüğünün yerleşmesi için herkesin bu haktan özgürce ve eşit bir şekilde yararlanabilmesi için çalışırdım.
I would work on mostly freedom and for the equality.
Thank you. Time for questions from the audience. One straight down the back.
Wait a minute.
I don't actually have a question. It's more so what Nabil actually said. I just want to continue on that. I'm not a reporter. I'm just, I say what I think, basically. When it comes to media freedom under threat, I think what you are trying to say, we got to go back to basics. So when you go to a country, it's like going, if I invite you to my home, I wouldn't like it when you go out and you just report you are selling dirty laundry. I wouldn't like it at all. So I think what you're trying to say is you got to have a bit of a balance when you do your reporting. It's not just the war or the bad stuff, but also the good stuff that's happening. Because I do come from Singapore. I have been to the National Library recently. They have all the things about the war. And then at the end, they put a very, very nice thing, a love story that happens during the war. It is so beautiful. I was so impressed. I was thinking, there you have the war, and then you have something so beautiful. Why not? Journalism should be in that way, because to know is to love. If we go back to basics, I think you won't be so much under threat. You got to go back to basics. That's human balance.
You have to really, because life is not only war and bad things, and it's not also good and positive things. So you have to create a balance. We as journalists, we are also human. So we need to be like really talk about what makes us happy, what makes us sad, how we want to do better society, what we wish good for ourselves, for our families and friends, and so on. I mean, we cannot isolate ourselves from the community and from the society. We also need to reflect people's need. I mean, this is journalism, and so what are the people's need? Do they really need to talk about war all the time? And even during war, there are also life happening. So why we don't cover that as well to make the balance in our coverage? Yeah, my boss is good at this. He's good. He believes in what I'm saying.
Yeah. That's why he's your boss, probably.
Yeah.
Hi, good evening. My name is Rineke. I'm director of Radio Zamaneh Independent Media for Iran, and we're operating from Amsterdam. And you've been talking about local journalism and the importance of local journalism. And so I'm just wondering if anyone on the panel has any suggestions or tips on how we from here can support local journalists and local journalism more.
How do you support them where? In which country?
No, not in Iran specifically, but maybe Jan has examples. But hey, you're talking about CNN sending in troops and then just leaving people. So one of the things that we're doing is working with people in a country. But like, how can we support them better, especially in closed societies?
I think, if I may, I mean, it's easy. Provide them with opportunity to work, and commission them positively to do. I think this is the best support when you offer them the job, and we give them a good editorial and mentoring and commissioning operation. Then I think this is a very good support for them. Identifying these individuals, of course, you have your criteria, and then offer them the job, because they all need money. They need, and if they are professionals, and it's good to work maybe with you, maybe you are a professional institution. They don't have that at their homeland. That would be good, and with your international standards and mentoring, you can make them better individual, and then you can get the best out of them.
Any other thought for something?
Ben 8 yıl tutsak kalmış bir gazeteci olarak
For being in 8 years in prison as a journalist,
içeride bulunduğum sürece dışarıda benim haklarımı savunan,
while I was inside, the people who were fighting for my freedom outside,
benim Benimle dayanışan gazetecilerin olması,
who supported me, the journalists who supported me outside,
insanların destekliyor olması beni,
all the people who supported from outside,
müthiş bir moral kaynağıydı.
It felt really good for me.
Şu anda Türkiye ya da başka ülkelerde
Now in Turkey or in other countries,
tutsak bulunan gazetecilerle dayanışmak,
supporting the journalists who are in prison,
dayanışmayı büyütmenin çok önemli olduğunu düşünüyorum.
I think that it's very important to support and be there for them.
Aynı zamanda Türkiye gibi ülkelerde
And the countries like in Turkey,
siyasal nedenlerden dolayı haber yapamayan,
because of political situations who cannot make news,
işsiz kalan,
and losing their jobs,
sürekli gözaltına alınma, tutuklanma tehdidiyle yaşayan,
living with the threat of being prisoner or being arrested,
meslektaşlarımızın,
all the fellows,
sesi olmak burada bizlere düşüyor.
it's important to be their voice here.
And what Füsün says is true. I mean, you hear that all the time. I mean, Amnesty knows it best, you know, how it works. Supporting people who are in prison, going to an Amnesty office, and writing cards, putting pressure on governments to release people who are in prison. It really works. So support that. Do something, you know, get out of your chair and go. And support also financially again. Unions, for instance, of CPJ, so they can help reporters in countries where, situation is very dire for journalists.
My question is to you, Nabil. You mentioned the importance of education, which I believe in, but it's a long-term process given the situation on the ground when it comes to Iraq. I think the only solution when it comes to conflict areas is to create a very strong, not only to conflict areas, but to all over the Middle East, I would say, the MENA region. I think the best is to create a very strong journalist union for, you know, to make them aware of their rights, legal rights, and also to make them respect the ethics in which they will be aware of through training within the syndicate, and to be abided by in order, that will be the condition to be a member. And I don't know what's the situation in Iraq when it comes to a union, because that's the only thing when it comes to journalists working together, being aware of their rights, respecting each other, and not violating each,
the situation.
Right.
Thank you. So the situation of journalist union in Iraq, I would say, if you give them weapons, they will start to kill each other. I don't think a union can make a good journalist, an ethical journalist. It comes within us. What I meant about education, it's like our media and the Arab world is not educated in human rights. It's not. It's illiterate. And I'm responsible for what I'm saying. They have no clue about what does it mean in human rights. In many of the TV coverage, if you want to analyze it, you see intentional and unintentional human rights violations in there. So this is what I'm saying. And because the audience is also receiving this unfiltered feed, then they are normalizing abuse of human rights through the media. And because the media is an influential tool, that it influences people. What I'm saying, if we educate this body, journalistic body, with all human rights principles and so on, and create a culture within, so reporting on human rights doesn't become a burden. Because now when you tell a journalist, oh, go and report on human rights, it's like, oh my God, it's like this is something very difficult for them to do because they're not used to it. And whereas human rights are normal things, this is the basics of our humanity, right? These are the basics. So they don't know how to report on that. I'm suggesting that we create a culture within the journalistic body and the media, so then they can feed the public with it, and then these principles and ethics become very natural. We hear them, we talk about them every day, and become natural things. And when they are violated, then we feel that, oh, that should stop. We should do something about it. But unions do not solve. Unfortunately, many unions are under political influence, and they start with good intentions. They end up with bad performance, and they do, bad to the journalistic body. So I don't recommend really unions. To be a journalist, you can be an independent freelancer with all the ethics and professionalism, and you can act responsibly. This is what actually everybody must do.
Thanks. You talked about the risk you saw in terms of digitalization because you saw threats towards journalists, right? Would you also see social media as an opportunity for media freedom in terms of, I see it bringing people together, catalyzing change movements, things like that, for example? And next to that, we also talked a lot about the good things in the Netherlands. At the same time, you mentioned, for example, Hungary and the changes you see there. Do you also see those in the Netherlands in terms of populist movements, for example?
So, a question for please. Yes, to the first question. Of course, obviously, the digitalization, the digital age has brought a lot of good developments, good social developments, developments for social movements, developments for marginalized communities to still have a platform for people who typically are unable to find their way through to institutions to still have, a voice and have their voice be magnified. But also I think for media and for journalists, social media has created a place where a source of information, a source of stories, a source of engagement also. I think it's often abused, to be honest, by media, so that's also part of it. But a lot of good has come out of out of social media and the digitalization. But I think everything good also has a counterpart, of course, and that's something we can't ignore. And your second question was about if in the Netherlands there was a similar populist movement as in Hungary, for example. Yeah. I think you can see that all over Europe, or even in the States, which is, by the way, my birth country of birth. So it's something that I'm also my family, a large part of my family lives there. So it's something I'm also invested in personally. That there is a populist movement throughout the world, and I think also here in the Netherlands, maybe not as prominent as in the States or in Hungary perhaps, but I think because there's a sort of political shifts going on that it also has tainted us as a country. And I don't know if your question is if it has influenced media. I think it has influenced media, maybe not in a direct sense that you have the government directly influencing media or journalists, but I think the shift does influence the climate and the public debate, and that it has caused a sort of shift towards more problematic reporting, or maybe more one-dimensional reporting, or more populist reporting. I mean, it's very attractive. It's a very attractive thing. That's why it's called populism, and I think that journalists are often attracted to it like moths to a flame, too much so that they forget that they also have a certain responsibility. And I think that is definitely what you see here also. But I think Jan can say more about that.
Yeah, we recognize that indeed. Also in Holland you see that, it's problematic, rise of populism, but at the same time we also saw that it, basically described it in our World Report that was launched a few weeks ago in Berlin. There's a massive pushback actually against populists, authoritarians. What we see is people rise in the streets in Warsaw and in Budapest. And in the US, where you have a massive anti-Trump movement right now, there's also a lot of positive developments. It's not just
there's a reason
gloom and doom.
More women
doom
in
and
Congress than ever, I think, also.
Sorry?
Right? That this year there are more women and minorities in Congress than ever in the history of the United States, and that's because of the pushback that you're talking about. And I hope we'll have a similar pushback here, to be honest.
And that's populism in politics, but also social media. The other question you asked, Of course, there's a lot of vitriol and a lot of awfulness on Facebook, Twitter, and other outlets, other platforms. But I would focus on the positives. I mean, you can really get a lot of people behind the cause. One example, not journalism, well, also in a way, the Save Hakim campaign. I actually put a football at a desk there. You can hold it up, put a photo, and put your own statement for a football player who got refugee status in Australia, went on a honeymoon to Thailand, but was arrested there because the Bahrainis put out a red notice via Interpol for his arrest. Bahrain, there's no rule of law there. The guy was tortured there. It's all very well documented. And he has refugee status, so he should be released immediately. But yeah, for some reason, probably political, he's still in prison. And what happened in the last week, on Monday he was in court, shackled, bare feet, an awful image that went viral all over the world, thanks to hundreds of thousands of people using that hashtag, Save Hakim, adding massive pressure on FIFA authorities in Thailand, who are actually also vulnerable there. They care about their image. They want you to go on holiday to Thailand. They want the World Cup football in the future. So there's a lot of pressure points, and social media can really help. You can get a mass of people behind it and get impact. What also Human Rights Watch is all about. We want impact. We want things to change for the better. And yeah, social media can be a very good tool there.
Sorry. Question towards everybody, but Clarice, you mentioned before that you want to create new infrastructures, and I'm wondering how can we, including you as the media, provide a safe infrastructure or like safe spaces for actors such as I'm thinking Chelsea Manning or more currently Reality Winner, who got imprisoned now for 5 years after she leaked classified documents from the NSA to the media platform The Intercept. So basically, how can we provide a safe structure for future whistleblowers as well?
Well, that's a difficult question. I think, to be honest, okay, I think it's not us as public that provides, or even the media that provides. I think it's the government that should provide that, and it's very problematic that actually they're the ones contributing to it. They should provide better laws. I mean, I think in Europe it would be on European level, you know, and in the States it would be, yeah. But I mean, yeah. So. But I think what we can do is speak out more on that and demand more. I think because it's all information that we consume. When we think about the what's it called, the Panama Papers, yes. I mean, come on, everyone knows that. You know, everyone heard about it. Everyone read it. So a lot of things that whistleblowers do for society and for communities are appreciated and are ingested. But then we don't give them the same appreciation back. So even though it's not our responsibility in the sense that we can create the infrastructure, but I think we can sort of, how do you say that? We can sort of ignite the movement that sort of sparks the people that should create it into doing it. So I think in that way we could report more about it. We could speak out more on social media, as you know, and create impact. So that's what I think we could do.
We have time for one final question.
And support the organizations that already do, by the way, because there are organizations that are already, you know.
You need to hold it. Okay, thank you. My question is for you, Nabil, about Iraq. You mentioned that CNN comes with lots of reporters.
I just gave an example.
Yeah, but exactly. I'm using the same example.
There are many others.
And then they leave. But I want to bring up another issue regarding the freedom for information, because I lived in the US during the Iraqi war. They were there, but they were embedded in tanks, and it turned into like a war movie, not much substance. So how do you see that? It's not, and it is happening in a country supposedly one of the best for freedom of press.
Yeah.
So what do you think about that?
Well, I mean, the CNN or Fox News or any other, Western agency, when it goes to a country, of course, they like to be embedded because of the rule of the conflict, that they can't go alone, and because and also what to cover is also an editorial choice that they make. I'm speaking about our editorial inside the country. So what's the editorial of the Iraqi institutions, how they want to cover the war and life during the war? This is something for Iraqis to decide. And I would say it shouldn't be similar to what the CNN reporter is going to do. Of course, he's not from Iraq, he doesn't know the country, maybe he made some research on Google for a few days before he went there, and they gave him a first aid kit and told him, go again in this Humvee and cover the war. And this is exactly the scenario. But my question, what local media has fed to you about the situation in the country during the war? This is what matters. This is what matters.
I understand that, but actually this is just an example, but my question or my comment is on a broader sense with the developed countries where the media freedom is supposed to be good. Are we really covering everything we should? Or are we going in the direction since the beginning of Middle East conflict, and how much information, true information, yeah, we talk about fake media, but what about the other way?
The information is censored. Of course, it depends, as I said, on the agenda and the editorials of the institution. But definitely a good journalism, responsible journalism that, regards human rights and people's needs should really look into humanitarian. It's not only about conflict, it's about people, how they live and so on, and their need as well. And as much as you reflect people's need, as much you can succeed in your coverage. Because you're not faking anything. It's there. You just need to see it. You need to be sensitive to it. People in our region are very sensitive to conflict only. They like trouble. They're not sensitive to good things.
But also count your blessings. Huh? I mean, in the US, there's also still very good media. I mean, it's not all Fox News or, like in Russia, Sputnik or RT, really awful media. You also have quality media. You still have the Washington Post, the New York Times. I mean, they also make mistakes. Nobody's perfect. But yeah, these are good outlets, and there are more of that. In Holland, the same thing. You have good quality newspapers here. Western Europe, yeah, I don't think you should be too negative about the media situation as it is.
That's exactly what my question's about. So I'm from the US, which is actually 45th for freedom in the Freedom Index. I just looked it up. But the media is so polarized, and as someone who watches, main networks, I often find it hard to find the facts. So as journalists, what are your suggestions for finding the truth amongst all the noise?
Select your news sources. Make sure you check out the right sources that are actually doing good journalism. What Nabil said is in Iraq is actually true everywhere in the world. You need to find out who are journalists who do their work in an ethical, a good way, who want to find out. I mean, not just cover what's happening, but also why is it happening, what are the facts. That's what it's about. So yeah, you have your own responsibility there as well to find find out what's
truth.
good.
There is no absolute.
No, so that's difficult, and I think the thing is, I think the first thing is if it sounds too ostentatious, it usually is, So that's the first thing, and like you said, find the right reliable sources. But the reliable sources aren't always going to be right. So so there's that. And then find the fact checkers. So you have the fact checkers that check the reliable sources. So in that way, you can sort of go step by step into being a critical consumer. But even if you do all of that, that doesn't mean you have found the truth. It's just a version of the truth that a bunch of people have agreed on, and it's been fact checked, so it's reliable. But there's still always, like he said, your own responsibility in being critical about everything you take in, and that is something that that's just, you have to do that through all your news consuming. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I think the concepts of freedom of expression and freedom for the press are Western concepts in essence. Of course, the whole world contributed one way or another. But unfortunately, there are examples of extremes or unreasonable red lines when it comes to freedom of information or freedom of expression or opinion in the West. And these are usually highlighted when we try to influence other societies and promote freedom of expression and all that. I mean, if we remember 9/11, what happened after that, if you remember, I mean, I was living in the UK and the Freedom of Information Act, I think, was put on hold. I mean, okay, threat of terrorism, then it's an excuse to do anything. And that's what Erdogan is using in Turkey, and that's what many others are using also. I mean, okay, I don't want to be too controversial to talk about the Holocaust and right to talk about the Holocaust and all that. That's another red line that is also not everybody agrees. I mean, I'm saying this because this is the defense that many people, I come from Libya, but I've been living there for a very long time. But I was working in Libya with Nabil, actually, after 2011. And it's, people are just, you know, they don't want to accept that freedom of expression is a basic human right, and they highlight examples of this kind. I mean, just a very general comment about Iraq, which is similar to Libya in the sense that it's a petrodollar society, and there's a big problem with people having money or earning money without doing much work. And when we work to develop the infrastructure for media, for journalism, we faced a problem because people don't feel they have to work hard and earn their living, and they really just not prepared to do what it takes to become a professional journalist. And of course, there are lots of obstacles about working in this society, so there's no model that fits all when it comes to how to develop journalism or media in third world countries or Middle East, as an example.
Thank you. Can I comment on that? Yes. Yeah. I mean, if human rights and ethics is seen as Western, if it's good, why not take it? So why? So what's the problem? Honestly, I mean, why take the best out of the West? Yeah. So it's a good rhyme.
What's the defense mechanism?
You know, you touch on something very important. Libya and Iraq, petro giants, right? And I can challenge you if you can go and find one economical journalist who can write about economy and oil. Zero. How do you see this? It's an opportunity. You know, you can write about economy and oil from now until the end of the days, and it will not put you in trouble. It will bring you more income. So also journalists can be smart about how they can, you know, approach things and how they can talk about things without putting themselves in trouble. Again, there is no story worth your life or your freedom. And as journalists, you have to really decide whether you publish or you don't publish, and you have to be the judge. At the end of the day, your freedom is worse than, you know, any story that or any scoop. So this is my recommendation.
But also, yeah, it's a bit of an insult, actually, Western concept. I mean, there are excellent journalists all over the world. I mean, I have colleagues in Indonesia, in the Philippines, in Nairobi, yeah, who are from these countries, and who are doing excellent, yeah, work, also for Human Rights Watch, but also their networks. There are very, very good journalists who do excellent work. I mean, in Myanmar, you have 2 reporters who are now in prison, should be released immediately. Who basically reported on a massacre by the army. Again, there you can also go online, find out what you can do to get these people free. Reuters journalists, but local people who did excellent work and yeah, should be free and not in prison.
I was gonna say that too. I don't think it's a Western concept at all. I think I have a friend who's my age in Liberia who's a journalist, and we, you know. Who's really passionate about her work and about press freedom. I do think maybe there's a difference, and maybe that's what you're trying to say, that Western journalism or media shouldn't be patronizing about the way we strive for press freedom or the way we do the reporting. But I think that
press freedom and freedom of press in general it's a universal thing. Yeah.
I think that our time is up. I think that's an appropriate note to end on too. We want to thank you for coming, but would you please thank our panelists for their contributions?
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.